Hello, Davila Texans. Welcome back to biology. This is your lesson for August 24th. That's a Monday. That would be my odd periods, first and third. And August 25th, that's my even classes. That's second and fourth. We're going to start our ecology unit today. This is your bell ringer. It just says to use your journal to study for your lab safety quiz. I know that some of you don't have journals, and that's okay. If you want to start one, that's perfectly fine. It'll be very useful to you when you come back into the classroom for face-to-face learning again. So if you haven't yet, take the time and start studying right now. I am going to pause the video and give you some time, or you'll pause the video and you can take time to do the assessment. There's an activity for you to practice. And then on the assessment, you get 3 tries to do it. You do need to make 100% on the quiz, and the quiz is a major grade. All of this is in the first part of this unit, right? So here we go. Today, our objectives are that I can identify the properties of water and why they are important to all life. I will conduct several labs to determine the properties of water. So our agenda is going to be lab safety quiz, and this is the way it's posted on Schoology 2. You have your lab safety quiz, notes on ecology. We're going to do our labs. Well, you're going to view the water lab activities, and then we're going to take more notes on why this is an important property of water. Again, if you would like to take notes, I would highly encourage it. I think that's a good idea. But you will have this PowerPoint accessible to you. So if you think that that's good enough for you, that's fine. Our burning question today is, how are water's unique properties essential for life on Earth? And this video is going to be pretty lengthy, but there are going to be points where I'm going to ask you to pause the video and then work on either your lab safety quiz or the water lab activity. Okay, so first we're going to do the lab safety quiz. It's all in Schoology. Just make sure that you complete it, and I think for you it is not timed. There is no time limit, but just make sure you get that done by the end of the day today on Monday. So if you would like to pause the video right here, that's actually perfect. So go ahead and do your lab safety quiz. Remember, there's a practice posted for you also to use, okay? All right, so now that you've completed your lab safety assessment, we're gonna talk a little bit about ecology. So I want you to think right now, ask yourself, what is ecology? Do you know? So eco actually is derived from the word, or it means habitat or surroundings, okay? Ology is, as always, the study of or field of study, right? So biology, bio means life. That's our class, right? Bio means life, and ology is the study of. So in the overarching subject of biology, you are going to learn everything there is about life, which includes ecology. In this case, you might then be wondering, what is an ecosystem, right? Well, we know what a system is, right? It's lots of little parts working together. So knowing that eco means habitat or surroundings, that's probably the habitat and the surroundings working together as a system as a whole, right? If you're wondering, I am in my own house. I am not in the classroom recording this right now, just in case you were curious about what's going on behind me. So let's talk about levels of organization in an ecosystem. Let's think about what exactly it is we're talking about here, right? So we're going to start with an individual. That's right down here at the bottom, our individual. This is any living thing or organism, just one. So you're an individual. My cat's an individual. He's sitting over here. Individually, right? This moose here in this example, he is one individual. And I'm guessing it's a he because he has antlers. Our next tier would be a population. A population is a group of individuals of the same species who live in the same place and at the same time, right? So there might have been previous evolutionary ancestors of moose that lived in this area, but because they are not living at the same time, they are not part of the population, right? If this moose's mom and dad are dead, they are no longer part of the population, right? They have to be living at the same time. Next, we're going to go to our community. So this includes all the populations living in the same area at the same time. So our population of moose, and our population of bobcats, our population of wild hares, here's a beaver. I know it's showing individuals, but you can imagine that each of these individuals lives within their own population, right? Their own group of moose, their own group of bobcats, their own group of owls, and they're all living in the same area at the same time. That is your community. It's like, this is you, right? An individual is you. The population would be your family living in the house with you, right? They're all related to you. And your community is all the houses on your street, okay? So then what is an ecosystem, right? We are here. This is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about an ecosystem. So what's that extra layer that we are adding to our community, which is so far only living organisms, right? Of course, a biome is a set of ecosystems sharing similar characteristics. So this looks like a prairie ecosystem, or maybe a coniferous forest, because I see some pine trees. There are other coniferous forests in other parts of the world, and those would all be considered the same biome. They all kind of have the same characteristics within that ecosystem. And our biosphere is the sum of all the ecosystems established on our planet. So our biosphere, you can kind of think of like all the things around the earth, right? Just wanted to give you a little perspective with this slide and kind of show you where we are and what we're talking about, right? So let's see what's next. So the more formal definition of an ecosystem would be the branch of biology. Remember, biology is the study of life. The branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and their physical surroundings, right? So ecosystem, if we go back to this slide, we're no longer just talking about these living organisms. Now we're going to start talking about how they interact with their surroundings, right? That's what makes it an ecosystem. It's not just the living things, but it's also the non-living things, right? That are interacting in that certain time or place. So here's where you're going to do your attendance check. It's not for a grade, but if you do not complete this, I cannot mark you present for the class. So please, please complete this. Based on both of these definitions, just kind of what I said and what you thought about our word breakdown that we did beforehand, can you define ecology in your own words? I want you to write a definition. I want you to write your definition. Now, when you go to the post, you're not going to be able to see any of your classmates' posts until you've created a post, okay? So don't try to hold off on the last minute and, oh, I'll just wait till somebody else posts and I'll go off of what they said, okay? Use your noggin, break it down. It's okay if you use some of the same words, but I just want them to be in your words, right? You would never say, the branch of biology that deals with, we wouldn't say that. I also have sentence starters to help you get started if you need that, okay? So if you want to, you can pause the video right here and go ahead and do that attendance check. I only say that to pause the video every once in a while because sitting here for how long this video is might not be that fun. So if you want to go and take care of it and kind of check things off your list, that's not a bad idea. So let's see. First, we're going to take a look at the physical surroundings part of that definition, right? Because remember I said it's all the communities, right? The different populations made up of individuals interacting with physical parts of their ecosystem. So there are two factors that make up all ecosystems. Oops, sorry. We have organic, or what you might remember as biotic factors, right? Those are things that are living or were alive. They also contain a new word that you might not have heard, hydrocarbon chains. Hydrocarbon chains are just the backbone to a lot of organic molecules. It's a bunch of carbon molecules or atoms, carbon atoms, excuse me, connected and surrounded by hydrogen atoms, right? Sometimes you'll have something off to the side, like a little, maybe an alcohol molecule or something like that. But the backbone of all forms of life are these hydrocarbon chains, okay? So some examples would be a dead leaf, but before it decomposes, right? So a leaf that's just fallen off of the tree, all of these hydrocarbon chains are still intact, right? Because we know once that leaf starts to be decomposed, these chains are going to break down into their individual parts, and then it is no longer organic or biotic part, right? We also have animals, plants, fungus, fruit. Inorganic, or what you might remember as abiotic factors, is everything else in the ecosystem. And I've given you some really specific examples and then some really broad examples. Broad examples would be like rocks and dirt, right? I could say air or water. But we're going to start getting down a little bit more detailed, right? Because next week or later this week, we're going to talk about the water cycle and the carbon cycle. And we're going to see that water doesn't just stay as water, right? Nitrogen doesn't just stay as nitrogen in the air. So other abiotic or inorganic things in an ecosystem would include water molecules, ammonium, nitrogen oxide, hydrogen, oxygen, and then again I put air, or atoms like carbon, right? Just individual atoms of carbon. These things are not alive. They are not made out of these hydrocarbon chains. So let's talk just a little bit about water. I know usually we think about water as a renewable resource and an infinitely abundant, but we actually rely on a very small portion of water on our so-called blue planet, right? We all know water is essential for life, but today we're going to investigate why. Why is water so important for life? So here are just some water facts that I have for you guys, right? What percentage of Earth's water is fresh water? About 3%, right? So here is all the water. Most of it is salt water in our oceans. And so if you think about it, the entire planet, about 3/4 of our planet, about 75% is water. So this is all of that 75%. And then only a small portion, this 3%, is fresh water. Okay, so what percent of that fresh water is trapped in icebergs and glaciers? That's, again, another huge chunk of it, right? And the rest of it is in the ground as groundwater. That's in the soil, maybe absorbed under some plants, right? This is all groundwater. So other freshwater resources is this 1% right here. That's the water in lakes, water in soil. Oh, so groundwater is just sitting on top of the water. Water in rivers, water in living organisms. They even put that in there, right? That's you and me included. And water vapor in the atmosphere, right? Our clouds, part of our atmosphere. So as far as where all the water is from that we use in our homes, it's either from groundwater source, right? This 20%. Such as a well, or it's from surface water source like a river, a lake, or a reservoir. Sometimes we get our water from aquifers. That's where Bryan College Station gets their water, from an aquifer. I don't remember the exact name of the aquifer, but if you look that up and tell me, I would greatly appreciate it. So this is where we're getting our water. I just want you guys to see that though it feels like water everywhere, just know that it is not as abundant as it may appear, right? Now, there are ways for us to desalinate ocean water and make it what we call potable water, or water that we can drink, but it's very, very expensive, so no one's really looked into this technology yet. I mean, we have, but no one's invested in the technology yet. So that's just a few fun facts about water. So now I would like you to pause the video and go ahead and do the water lab activity. Do your best. Use the vocabulary to help you. I think I've also set this to be either 2 or 3 attempts. So if you do it once and you don't like your answers, or you don't like how you worded something, or maybe you learned something better after watching the rest of this video, go ahead and retry it. I'm okay with that. I like to tell my classes that the point of labs is for you to have some kind of experience where you have learned something. And some of these you can very easily try at home. You're going to see me doing a lot of them. Our wonderful IC, Tasha Terry, also helps me record some of these videos. So go ahead and attempt that, and come right back to this video for the rest of it. So once you have completed that, we're going to take some notes on properties of water. Again, you can handwrite these, write them down. You can have like a Word document open, whatever you're comfortable with, right? I want you to know that you do not have to write every word, especially if you're typing. This is not going to be super beneficial. I want you to read the slide, listen to my words, and then write what makes sense to you, right? Because these are your notes. This is something you're going to have to reference to study, right? So water is polar. And what I mean by that is it is charged. So we are going to draw a water molecule right now. Okay, so I want you to think about water as a polar bear, right? We all know the shape of water. It's kind of in that bent kind of V shape. Water is polar. Polar means that it's charged, right? Water has a polarity. One side is a little bit more negative than this other really a little bit more positive side. So I want you to draw this in your journal. Here we go. We want one big old negative oxygen, and then let's get 2 tiny positive hydrogens, right? Hydrogen is much smaller than oxygen because it doesn't have as many protons and neutrons in its nucleus as oxygen, right? I don't know if you remember Bohr models. You should. This is from 8th grade. This is a Bohr model of, let me move this. This is a Bohr model of oxygen. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons total. But remember, in order to be happy and stable, atoms want to fill out that outside or valence level of their electrons, right? So oxygen here, it looks like it's got 2 empty spots. Well, guess what's really cool about hydrogen is it has this guy hanging out here, right? But in order for it to be happy, oxygen is going to have to bond to 2 hydrogens, right? So one's going to go here, and then we would have another hydrogen molecule that would bond right here. Now these bonds are what we call covalent bonds. They are very strong bonds. They are sharing these electrons, right? But the way that they are shared is unequal, right? It's not equal. So let's talk about what that does and why that's important for the polarity. So because oxygen is so much bigger and he's really greedy with his electrons, he actually has, I say he and she, we know atoms do not have genders. This is just me processing, and I hope it helps you process. Oxygen is much bigger, and it has a more electronegative pull, and it is able to hold on to that electron a little bit closer to it than hydrogen is, which makes the oxygen part of water what we call partially negative. That's this symbol. Now you're going to learn a lot more about this in chemistry, but for us, it's really important that you understand this about water, okay? So if we got a partial negative over here, that means that here is a partial positive, right? Because it's losing some of that negative energy from its electron being taken away, right? So if you're less negative, that means you're a little bit more positive. Now, this is not saying that they are total opposites, right? That it's highly, highly positive and highly, highly negative. This is a partial positive and negative charge throughout one molecule. I like to call it a polar bear because it kind of looks like a little bear, right? Just remember that oxygen is where that negative that slightly negative part is, and the hydrogen atoms are on the slightly positive end. Okay, so let me clear my drawings. Okay, so let's talk about your activities. Cohesion, right, is what we're showing here. I want you to think, which lab activities did you observe cohesion? It was probably multiple activities. Wax paper, whenever you had it on the wax paper, right? That cohesion is what formed those bubbles, right, to keep the water clumped together as one. So even though we started with the water spread out, whenever they touch each other, they like to stick together, right? So water molecules stick together because, again, there's this slightly negative part and a slightly positive part, and they're attracted to each other, right? The oxygen and the hydrogen are attracted to each other because they are opposite electronegativities, right? So the dotted lines represent hydrogen bonds formed between the slightly positive hydrogens and the slightly negative oxygens. This is what allows cohesion to happen, for water molecules to stick to each other. So let's actually talk about what cohesion is. Again, you have those definitions. I shared them with you to help you through the lab, but let's just go into it a little more, and also about why it's important. So cohesion is the attraction between water molecules, right? Water to water. An example could be water droplets on a window, water droplets kind of on your skin when they run down. Remember that co means together. If you think about the word cooperate, you could break that up into co and operate. Co means together, operate means to work. So when we cooperate, we work together, right? Didn't know you were going to have an English lesson here, huh? So cohesion is water sticking to other water molecules. Co, right? Your companion, right? You are friends together. That's also going to kind of help you keep the difference between cohesion and adhesion. I have another memory trick for adhesion, so look out for that, right? Co means they're the same. It's water to water. So what kind of bonds hold the water molecules together? That was hydrogen bonds, right? These weak bonds between the slightly positive and slightly negative oxygen atoms. So the importance of this is that it helps create surface tension. Surface tension we will go on to define a little bit later, but that is the importance of cohesion. So in which lab activity did you observe adhesion? Adhesion, remember, is water molecules attracted to other polar substances, so other charged substances. The reason that the water did not adhere to the wax paper is because the wax paper is made out of what we call lipids, right? They are not polar. It is not polar. It is not a charged surface. So the water easily slid off and around the wax paper. That is also why you wax your car. The water droplets that land on your car sometimes will dry, and they'll leave like what we would call a water stain or a watermark. But if you put wax on your car and the water beads and it gets into droplets while it falls off your car, you're not going to have that left behind kind of dried watermark, right? So adhesion was observed in the paper towel, not the paper towel, but the strip of paper, right, with the dot, the straw, right, because the water needed to stick to the edges of the straw as well. Cohesion was also in the straw activity. So let's talk about adhesion. Adhesion is the attraction of water to other polar or charged substances, right? So these leaves here are polar and the water is kind of sticking to them. So water to something else. And importance in this is it also helps create surface tension, right? In order to have surface tension, we need it to stick. We need water to stick to whatever the container is holding it. Sorry. Remember, with adhesion, this is my little memory trick, you are adding another object for water to stick to. So cohesion, is cooperate, right? Water and water. Adhesion, you are adding something else for the water to stick to. This is the way I remember it. If you think of anything else, please let me know. I love to have little memory tricks in my repertoire of teaching tools. So, so now we're going to talk about surface tension. In which lab activity did you observe surface tension? Probably the biggest, most obvious one would be the paperclip, right? So let's just take a moment and watch this bug. He is called a water strider. And I know that you all during the summer have probably seen bugs of some sort walking on top of some kind of water, right? Or maybe in your pool, you know how a yellow jacket or a wasp can land on the pool, the first surface of your pool, and maybe get a drink or cool down. Mosquitoes also use this to lay their eggs on top of really shallow ponds and other water sources, right? That's why mosquitoes really love water. They lay their larvae and their eggs on the water. Excuse me, I have to go on. Whew. So what happened when you touch the top of the paperclip? Whenever I touched the top of the paperclip in that video, what happened? It immediately sunk to the bottom, right? And why would that happen? Why do you think, what was it that, because it was fine before, right? It was floating. It's not because the paperclip was less dense than the water, right? It was the surface tension that was holding it up. That interaction between the water molecules, right? That cohesion of the water molecules sticking together kept the paperclip up. As soon as I put enough force to break the hydrogen bonds, the paperclip fell through, right? And it hit the bottom. It broke the surface tension. I broke those hydrogen bonds. So let's talk about surface tension. I have this great little graphic here. It shows you that water has a stronger connection up here at the top because when it's in the middle of the water, it's kind of connecting in all sorts of ways, every which way, any way it can, right? That oxygen is connecting to a hydrogen, you know, in very sporadic and spread out kind of ways. But when you get to the top, they all sort of line up and they form like a really cool barrier of, okay, this is our negative side up or our positive side up, and it's just more uniformed, right? The surface of the water is the most uniformed that liquid water gets, is right at the surface. Liquid water, remember that. So the water molecules at the surface are strongly attracted to one another. That's cohesion, right? Cohesion is part of surface tension. It's important because some insects aren't heavy enough to break that tension and they can walk across it. Either this is where they live, this is where they get their nutrients, their source of water, or maybe that's where they lay their eggs, right? Ooh, another one. So let's talk about universal solvent. Which activity did you observe that the water is a universal solvent? It was probably in that salt, the salt water one. That was most obvious. So if you see here, NaCl is what we call table salt, right? So Na has one negative charge. Again, you're going to learn more about how the charges are helping build these molecules and why they bond the way they do. But for right now, I just want you to notice that when Na and Cl break up, Na has a positive charge. This is not partial positive. This means it has lost an electron, right? It's an ion now. So it is positively charged, right? Because it's positively charged, it's going to attract the negative, and I don't know why these are red and this is blue. To me, negative should always be red and positive should always be blue. But Don't worry about the colors, right? This is the oxygen molecule, and here are hydrogens. So it's those oxygens that are immediately attracted to the sodium. And it's so attracted that it's actually able to break these two ions apart into their positive and negative ions. The chloride ion is a lot, it's negatively charged, so it's going to attract all of those hydrogens. And basically what they do is they kind of surround them like a SWAT team, and they isolate them just into those two different parts. So once it's completely dissolved, that means it's coated in all these water molecules, and it's no longer NaCl as table salt still in a solution, right? Let's move on. So let's talk about it being a universal solvent. I want you to know this fun fact. Water dissolves more substances than any other liquid. Water is amazing. It's really cool. It's really special, and it dissolves more substances than any other liquid. So I'm really glad that whenever I eat something, I have lots of water in my body to help me break it up into its individual parts so that I can get the nutrients from it. So many things dissolve in water because it is a polar solvent, right? Remember, it's charged. It's got that partially positive and the partially negative bits. A solvent, in case you were wondering, is a substance in which something can be dissolved, right? If you're a solvent, you dissolve things. This is important because it allows for nutrients to be dissolved by body fluids for transport, right? So whenever you intake some hamburger, it's not just one chunk of hamburger that's going through your bloodstream into all your other organs and all your tissues and all your cells. It's broken up into very, very small, useful pieces, like the iron you get will go to your blood. The different proteins will be broken up into different amino acids for your body to replicate DNA and to make different proteins. We're going to get all into that. Just know that the water in your body helps break it up and get it to where it needs to be a lot easier. So we all know, it was probably not surprising, that the ice floated on top of the water. It is so common, it might not have surprised you as something that was unique or interesting. It's kind of a boring video, but the fact that water is less dense as a solid is actually really interesting. So the activity that we witnessed that in, or that we observed that in, was the pouring the ice or the water into the beaker and then putting the ice on top of it. The reason this is because when water is in its solid form, when it's ice, these hydrogen bonds become very, very stable, and they're very, very rigorous, and they are in a very structured, we call this hexagonal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, hexagonal kind of structure, and it's super, super strong, but also there's lots of empty space in here, and that empty space makes it less dense, right? Because density is a measure of the amount of volume to the amount of mass. So here we have increased, hold on, let me pause this and double check. So here we have increased the volume, but we have not changed the mass of the water, right? And if we increase the volume, that's what we're dividing by. So when you divide by a larger number, let me write this down for those of you who are like, what is she talking about? So density, as we all know, is mass divided by volume, right? The mass is going to stay the same, but now we're going to divide by a larger number. We now have more volume in here. And when we divide by a larger number, the quotient of that division problem, the answer to that division problem is going to be a smaller number, right? Think to yourself, what's smaller? 20 divided by 2 or 20 divided by 10? right? 20 divided by 2 is only 10, whereas 20 divided by 10 is 2, right? So our density has changed because we changed the volume. We changed this divisor that we're dividing by, right? Okay. That does not make sense. Don't worry. It will in short order. What's really important is that you understand that ice is less dense than water, right? Because those hydrogen bonds are really stable. But whenever water is a liquid, the hydrogen bonds are constantly breaking and reforming, and there's no order. Look, this guy's not even attached to anybody, right? We have lots of negative charges close to each other, but here everything is very well organized and structured. So, talking about water's density. Oops, sorry, that's not a good place to put that. Ice is less dense than liquid water. So this, if you think about it, allows fish to stay alive in a frozen lake during the winter, right? You know, in Alaska, they go out onto their lakes, or maybe Minnesota too. I don't know. You get cold enough and you can go fishing on a frozen lake. You can do that because the ice is floating on top and the fish are still allowed to swim and live in the water below it, right? Now, if the ice froze and it sunk to the bottom, every year that would happen, right? It would just freeze and sink, and then eventually the whole thing would be frozen, right? But because it floats and the water is warmer down here, the fish can live, right? The fish can continue to live in the water. So I want you to understand that this is a very unique property to water, okay? There is no other substance that is less dense as a solid. Water is super special and very, very important. There's really no other solution, or there's really no other molecule quite like it, right? Let's watch this short video. The first is just simply him putting ice in water like you saw in your lab. Later, he puts what we know as benzene into liquid benzene, right? And as you can see, it floats directly to the bottom. I know they both look like water, but that second one is not water, it's benzene. So this is a unique property to water, and it makes water really, really cool, and it's very important and unique to us staying alive on our planet. So the high heat capacity obviously was this video here. I'm not going to play it because you have already seen it. Let's talk about what a high heat capacity means. So capacity means like your max, right? Your all-out optimized level. Water requires a lot of heat to evaporate. Remember, evaporation is liquid water turning into a gas, or what we call water vapor. The gaseous form of water is called water vapor, and we're going to get into that when we study the water cycle later this week. So this is important because the ocean actually absorbs 90% of the heat from the sun. 90%. If we didn't have all those big, big, vast oceans, do you know how bloody stinking hot it would be on the planet? Oh my goodness, it would be so hot. We don't want that, right? We like our oceans. They absorb a lot of the heat and they keep us nice and cool. I know it gets hot here in Texas, but imagine if globally our temperatures were 90% hotter. It also allows your sweat to cool you down because it takes so much energy as heat. Heat is a type of energy, remember, because it takes so much for that sweat to be evaporated off your skin. Whenever it evaporates, it's taking that heat energy as heat with it, and it's actually cooling your skin down. So that's very important. I like when my sweat evaporates and it cools me down. So let's talk about capillary action. Capillary action has a lot to do, again, with surface tension and, sorry, it's a cat toy. Capillary action has a lot to do with surface tension, cohesion, and adhesion, right? So if you look here, the activity that went with that was the straw as a pump. I know it was kind of difficult. I know a lot of kids in class had trouble getting it to go up there because water is a really small molecule, and usually in nature there are smaller tubes that water's traveling up, smaller than a giant straw, right? Particularly in plants. So plants use their xylem and their phloem. We're going to learn about those later when we learn about plants, to actually transport water and nutrients into their roots and up their trunks or their stems into the leaves, right? Because the leaves don't get water from the rain hitting the leaves. It comes from the ground. So how does it get all the way from the ground, into the ground, up the roots, up the trunk, into the leaves? It's this capillary action, right? It's that constant adhesion and cohesion of water being able to move up a really thin, porous space. So it's the process that moves water through a narrow porous space due to the forces of adhesion, cohesion, and surface tension. Again, this is important because it allows plants to intake and transport water and nutrients through their roots and stems. So this is the last thing I'm going to leave you with. We're going to be talking about what the most commonly occurring elements in the human body are. I just want you to take a second and think about these elements, right? And remember what we're made out of, right? If we are alive, that means we're organic, and all organic things are made out of hydrocarbon chains, right? That's all those carbon atoms with those branching hydrogen atoms attached to it. So we have lots of those in us. We also have good stuff like oxygen, right? We breathe in the oxygen. It's in our blood. We breathe the oxygen out as water, as well as hydrogen. There's phosphorus, maybe calcium, right? Calcium can be in our bones. So I want you to kind of think just for a second, maybe pause the video and think about what these percentages might be. And they might actually surprise you. So go ahead, pause the video and think about it. Okay, whether or not you pause the video, here are the answers. We are mostly oxygen. Okay, that is because there's lots of oxygen in our blood. There's oxygen is very important for a lot of our cellular processes. We breathe in oxygen for those cellular processes. And then, of course, we're made out of carbon because of those those hydrocarbon chains, right, that we're made out of. And then hydrogen because of the water. We also have lots of nitrogen in us, calcium in our bones, and phosphorus too. So remember, if you can be anything, be kind. I will see you guys on Thursday, Friday. I'll also have a lesson for you on Wednesday, so be looking out for that. Okay, thank you.